Last month, I received a package. There was no return address. It held a file, my file, from the year 2004, pages that I'd never seen before, missions that I'd never been briefed on, and a photograph that chilled me to the bone. There was no return address, just a box number in Washington, D.C. But the stationery was clear enough, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Someone wants this story told. And after the things that I've read and 22 years of silence, I know why. If stories such as this interest you, please subscribe. We share such stories every day, and they should be told. Hi, my name is David Mitchell. I'm 52 years old. I retired from the Air Force, where I was a technical sergeant with 16 years' experience maintaining radar systems at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, where NORAD is located. Most people think NORAD is the organization that tracks Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. They get to see the cute stories in the news every year, with the kids calling in asking Rudolph's location, the people in uniform happily answering the phone with big smiles. What they don't see is what happens on the other 364 days of the year. The classified command center buried 2,000 feet inside granite. The blast doors thick enough to survive a nuclear strike. The radar systems monitoring every inch of North American airspace, tracking thousands of objects every single hour. Satellites, aircraft, missiles, anything that moves above us, we see it. Or at least, we're supposed to. I joined the Air Force right out of high school in 1992. Desert Storm had just ended, and I wanted to serve, wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. My recruiter asked what interested me, and I said, computers, technology, anything technical. He smiled and said, "Son, have I got the perfect assignment for you." 6 months later, after basic training and tech school, I found myself at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, assigned to NORAD. My job was simple: watch the screens, track the objects, report anything unusual. And for the first 12 years, that's exactly what I did. Satellites crossing predictable orbits, commercial aircraft following their flight plans, military exercises with fighters and bombers, weather balloons, the occasional meteor. Everything had an explanation. Everything fit the pattern. Until November 5th, 2004. I was 28 years old, married for 3 years to my high school sweetheart, Sarah. We lived in a small apartment in Colorado Springs, talking about buying our first house, maybe starting a family. Life was good, normal, predictable. My shift that night started at 2200 hours, 10 at night civilian time. The swing shift, what we called mid-watch, 8 hours buried inside the mountain, staring at radar screens in a room kept at 65 degrees year-round. The air was recycled, filtered, sterile. You could taste the metal in it. The command center at NORAD is massive. Picture a room the size of a basketball court, filled with rows of computer stations, each one manned by specialists watching different sectors of airspace. Overhead, enormous display screens showed the continental United States, Canada, parts of Mexico and the Pacific. Green dots for friendly aircraft. Yellow dots for unknowns that we're tracking but haven't identified yet. Red would mean hostile, but I'd never seen red in 12 years. I worked Station 7, responsible for monitoring high-altitude airspace over the Rocky Mountain region. My partner that night was Technical Sergeant Marcus Thompson. Good guy. 6 years in the Air Force, solid operator, never got rattled. We'd worked together for 2 years. "Quiet night," Marcus said as I settled into my chair, adjusting the headset. The screens in front of me glowed soft green, showing a relatively clear picture. A few commercial jets at cruising altitude. One military transport heading toward Peterson. Nothing unusual. "Let's hope it stays that way," I replied, logging into the system. The computer chirped as it verified my credentials, pulling up my assigned monitoring sector. For the first 4 hours, nothing happened. Marcus and I talked about football. The Broncos were having a good season. He was planning a trip to Hawaii with his wife for their anniversary. I mentioned Sarah and I were looking at houses. Normal conversation. The kind you have when you're staring at screens for 8 hours and your brain needs something to focus on besides the monotony. Then at 0200 hours, 2 in the morning, everything changed. A tone sounded, not loud but distinct. Every operator in the room knew that tone. It meant the system had detected something unusual, an unknown object entering monitored airspace. I glanced at my screen. A yellow dot had appeared, high altitude, moving south over Wyoming. The system was tracking it, trying to correlate it with known flight plans, satellites, anything in the database. Station 7, contact, I reported, my voice calm. This happened sometimes. A private aircraft that hadn't filed a flight plan, a weather balloon that drifted off course, usually nothing. Station 7, Roger, came the response from the supervisor's station. Verify and identify. I started running protocols, checking altitude. The object was at 80,000 feet. That immediately ruled out most aircraft. Commercial jets max out around 45,000 feet. Even military jets rarely go above 60,000. Station 7, I have unknown at 80,000 feet, speed 500 knots, heading south, I reported. My heart rate had picked up slightly. This was unusual. Marcus leaned over, looking at my screen. Satellite? I checked the satellite tracking database. Nothing matched the trajectory or altitude. Negative, not correlated with any known satellite. The yellow dot continued moving south, steady speed, steady altitude. I watched it cross into Colorado airspace. Then, something happened that made my blood run cold. The dot stopped. Not slowed down. Stopped. Instantly. From 500 knots to 0 in a fraction of a second. No aircraft could do that. The G-forces alone would tear anything apart. Station 7, be advised. Unknown has ceased movement, I reported, trying to keep my voice level. Altitude maintaining 80,000 feet, speed 0. There was a pause from the supervisor. Station 7, confirmed 0 velocity. Confirmed. Unknown is stationary at 80,000 feet. Around the command center, other operators were glancing at their screens, watching the same thing. The yellow dot sat there, motionless, 80,000 feet above northeastern Colorado, right in the middle of my monitoring sector. Get me specifics, the supervisor ordered. Size, radar signature, anything. I worked the controls, refining the radar return. The object was roughly 15 meters across. The radar signature was strange, metallic, but with properties I'd never seen before. It was reflecting the radar in ways that didn't match any known aircraft or satellite. Sir, radar signature is anomalous, I reported, not consistent with any known aircraft type. The supervisor, Staff Sergeant Jenkins, walked over to my station. He was 40 years old, 15 years in the Air Force, seen everything. But when he looked at my screen, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Confusion. Run diagnostics, he ordered. Make sure the equipment is functioning properly. I ran the full diagnostic sequence. Every system came back green. The radar was working perfectly. The anomaly was real. Equipment checks out, Sergeant. The contact is genuine. He stared at the screen for another moment. Keep tracking. I'm notifying the watch commander. By now, every operator in the command center was watching. The room had gone from routine monotony to tense focus in minutes. This wasn't just unusual. This was unprecedented. The yellow dot continued its impossible hover at 80,000 feet. Completely motionless. No drift, no variation in altitude. Just sitting there. Station 7, this is Watch Commander. A new voice came through my headset. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan, 38 years old, sharp, capable. I'd worked under her for 3 years. Confirm your readings. Ma'am, unknown contact at 80,000 feet, north-northeast Colorado. Object approximately 15 meters diameter. Radar cross-section metallic but anomalous. 0 velocity, no correlation with known satellites or aircraft. Duration of contact? I checked the timestamp. 7 minutes, ma'am. Maintain tracking. I'm scrambling alert fighters from Peterson. My heart started pounding harder. Scrambling fighters meant this was serious. In 12 years at NORAD, I'd seen maybe 5 scrambles. All of them turned out to be Russian bombers testing our response times or civilian aircraft with communications failures. This was different. Marcus was running parallel checks on his station, verifying my data. David, I'm showing the same thing. This is real. I know. What the hell is it? I don't know, but we're about to find out. But what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about what flies above us. The yellow dot started moving again, but not in any way that made sense. It dropped from 80,000 feet to 40,000 feet in 3 seconds. My hands froze on the controls as I watched the altitude reading plummet. 40,000 feet in 3 seconds meant it was descending at 800,000 feet per minute. Nothing could do that. The G-forces would liquefy any human pilot. Then it shot back up. Not gradually, instantly, from 40,000 feet to 90,000 feet in under 2 seconds. The radar showed the velocity spike, over 4,000 knots during the ascent. Mach 6, faster than the fastest jet we had. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered beside me. Station 7, are you seeing this? The supervisor's voice had an edge now, not fear exactly, but something close. Affirmative. Unknown is executing maneuvers inconsistent with known aircraft capabilities. Vertical drop, 800,000 feet per minute, followed by instant ascent to 90,000 feet. Velocity during ascent exceeded 4,000 knots. I heard someone inhale sharply over the command net. These numbers were impossible. They violated everything we knew about aerospace engineering. The object didn't stop there. It began moving west at speeds the tracking system could barely calculate. Over 2,000 knots, Mach 3, with 0 acceleration time. Just instant velocity. Then it stopped again, perfectly motionless at 70,000 feet. Station 7, any heat signature? Colonel Brennan asked. I checked the infrared overlay. Negative, ma'am. No thermal emissions detected. That was impossible. Anything moving at those speeds through the atmosphere should be generating enormous heat from friction. Fighter jets at Mach 2 had surface temperatures over 1,000 degrees. This thing was moving at Mach 6 and showing 0 heat signature. No sonic booms reported from ground observers, another voice added over the net. That was impossible too. Breaking the sound barrier creates sonic booms. This object had broken it multiple times in the last 5 minutes. We should have had reports flooding in from every town in northern Colorado. But there was nothing. Just silence. For the next 12 minutes, we watched it perform maneuvers that redefined my understanding of what was possible. Right-angle turns at speeds that should have torn any structure apart. Instant acceleration from 0 to Mach 3. Drops and climbs that exceeded anything in our aerospace arsenal by orders of magnitude. Marcus was taking detailed notes, his hand shaking slightly as he wrote. Every operator in the command center was watching now, screens forgotten. This was the kind of event you tell your grandchildren about, the kind that changes everything. Then, the object did something that made my hands shake on the controls. It descended rapidly to 20,000 feet, low enough that ground-based observers could potentially see it, and stopped directly over Cheyenne Mountain, over us, right above our heads. The radar showed it centered perfectly over our facility, hovering with absolute precision. Unknown has positioned over our facility, I reported, my mouth suddenly dry. Altitude 20,000 feet, directly overhead, zero lateral movement, perfect hover. The command center went silent. Everyone was staring at the screens. The yellow dot sat there, motionless, right above us. It felt deliberate, like it knew exactly where we were, like it was aware of us watching it. Colonel Brennan's voice came through, tight and controlled. All stations, maintain tracking. Station 7, time to fight or intercept? I checked the tactical display. Raven flight launching now from Peterson, ETA 4 minutes. Those were the longest 4 minutes of my life. The object remained perfectly still, hovering 20,000 feet above our heads. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on the mountain, even though I knew that was impossible. We were 2,000 feet underground, but the psychological weight was real. Station 7, Raven 1 flight is airborne, the tactical coordinator reported. 2 F-16s climbing to Angels 20. Angels 20, 20,000 feet. Intercept altitude. I watched both sets of contacts on my screen. The 2 F-16s climbing rapidly from Peterson Air Force Base and the unknown object hovering above Cheyenne Mountain. They were going to meet in less than 2 minutes. Raven 1, NORAD control. Colonel Brennan's voice was steady. Vector 340, Angels 20. You have an unknown contact directly overhead Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Approach with caution and report visual. NORAD, Raven 1 copies. 340, Angels 20. Be advised, we're picking up the contact on our radar, showing stationary target, no transponder. The F-16s closed the distance. I watched the green dots, our fighters, merge with the yellow dot on my screen. They were there, right underneath it. NORAD, Raven 1, we have visual on your unknown. Every person in the command center leaned forward. This was it. Visual confirmation. Go ahead, Raven 1. There was a pause. When the pilot spoke again, his voice had changed. The professional military tone was still there, but underneath it was something else. Disbelief. NORAD, Raven 1 has visual on a... I've never seen anything like this. Stand by for description. Another pause. I could hear him breathing over the radio. Quick, shallow breaths. Contact is disc-shaped, approximately 50 feet across, maybe 15 feet thick at the center, tapering to the edges. Smooth metallic surface. Looks like brushed steel or titanium, but I can't be certain. No visible engines, no exhaust, no wings, no control surfaces of any kind. Just a disc. It's reflecting the moonlight, completely stationary, not even drifting. Marcus was writing frantically, trying to capture every word. I was recording everything through my station, but I was also just listening, trying to comprehend what we were hearing. NORAD, Raven. 2 confirms visual, same description. Sir, this thing has no visible means of propulsion. It's just hovering. I'm approximately 1,000 feet below it right now, looking directly up. No sound, no jet wash, nothing. Raven Flight NORAD. Can you determine markings or nationality? Negative NORAD. No markings visible. No national insignia. No serial numbers. Surface appears completely smooth. Colonel Brennan's next question was the one we were all thinking. Raven 1, attempt radio contact. All frequencies. NORAD Raven 1, attempting contact now. We waited. I watched the display screen, showing the F-16s circling slowly beneath the object. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. NORAD Raven 1, no response on any frequency, no radio emissions detected. This thing is completely silent. Then, everything changed. NORAD, it's moving straight up, vertical ascent, extremely high rate of climb. On my screen, the yellow dot shot upward like it had been fired from a cannon. The altitude reading climbed so fast I almost couldn't track it. 20,000 feet to 50,000 feet in under 3 seconds. Raven 1, can you pursue? Negative NORAD. That thing just went from 0 to... I don't even know. We're at full military power, and it's leaving us behind like we're standing still. It's climbing through 70,000 feet now, 80,000, 90,000. Sir, we can't go that high. I watched the object climb through 100,000 feet, then 120,000 feet. It was leaving the atmosphere. The radar started losing resolution as it climbed beyond our effective tracking range. Station 7, NORAD. Do you still have contact? Contact fading, ma'am. Object is through 130,000 feet and climbing, beyond effective radar range. Raven 1, NORAD. Return to base. NORAD. Raven 1 copies. But, sir, what the hell was that? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. The object vanished from our radar at 140,000 feet. Gone, like it had never been there. The F-16 circled once more, then turned back toward Peterson. Colonel Brennan entered the command center. I'd seen her handle crises before: Russian bombers, Chinese surveillance, terrorist threats. She was always calm, always in control, but right now, her face was pale. Station 7, Station 4, Station 9. All operators who had eyes on that contact. I need your complete logs. Everything. Every reading. Every observation. I want it all documented and classified immediately. Yes, ma'am, I responded. She looked directly at me. Mitchell, how long did we track that object? I checked my timestamps. Total contact time, 23 minutes, ma'am, from first detection to loss of contact. And the maneuvers it performed? Ma'am, I hesitated. How do you summarize the impossible? Accelerations exceeding 4,000 knots with no visible acceleration time, vertical drops and climbs that should have generated thousands of Gs, right-angle turns at supersonic speeds, all with zero heat signature, zero sonic booms, and zero visible propulsion. She nodded slowly. And the F-16 visual confirmation? Disc-shaped craft, metallic surface, no markings, no visible means of propulsion. Pilots estimated 50 feet diameter. All right. She took a deep breath. This incident is now classified top secret SCI, code word restricted. The classification is Tango Zulu 4. All recordings, all logs, all radio communications are sealed. Nobody discusses this outside this room without proper clearance. Is that absolutely clear? Yes, ma'am, came the chorus of responses. She looked around the command center, meeting each operator's eyes. What you witnessed tonight stays here. You will not discuss it with your families. You will not discuss it with other personnel. You will not discuss it with each other outside of official debriefings. Am I understood? More acknowledgments. Good. Mitchell, Thompson, Jenkins, I need you in conference room 3 in 1 hour. Bring your logs. She walked out. The command center remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, operators began returning to their stations. But everything had changed. We'd just watched something that shouldn't exist perform maneuvers that shouldn't be possible, and now we were being told to forget about it. Marcus leaned over. David, we both saw that, right? I didn't imagine it? You didn't imagine it. None of us did. So what was it? I looked at my screen, at the empty space where the yellow dot had been. I have no idea, but whatever it wasn't ours. The rest of the shift passed in a haze. I documented everything: altitude readings, velocity calculations, radar characteristics, timeline of events, every detail I could remember. The debrief in conference room 3 was even more surreal. Colonel Brennan was there, along with 2 men in civilian clothes I'd never seen before. No name tags, no introductions, just government-issue badges that read Department of Defense. They asked questions, lots of questions. What exactly did I see? What were the readings? Could it have been a malfunction? Could it have been a weather phenomenon? Could it have been experimental aircraft? I answered honestly. No, it couldn't have been a malfunction. Multiple systems confirmed the readings. No, it couldn't have been weather. Weather doesn't reflect radar like metal and perform controlled maneuvers. And no, it couldn't have been experimental aircraft. Our technology can't do what that object did. They didn't like those answers. After 2 hours of questioning, they had me sign documents, non-disclosure agreements, security classifications, papers with words like federal prosecution and loss of security clearance and imprisonment scattered throughout. "Sergeant Mitchell," one of the suited men said, his voice flat and emotionless, "what you witnessed on November 5th was a classified operation involving experimental aerospace vehicles. That is the only explanation you are authorized to discuss or consider. Do you understand?" I understood perfectly. They were telling me to lie, to tell myself and everyone else that what I saw was just some secret Air Force project, even though I knew that nothing in our arsenal could perform those maneuvers. "Yes, sir," I replied. "I understand." "Good. Your report has been reclassified. Your logs have been seized. Your radar tapes have been confiscated. This incident will be sealed under Special Access Program protocols. This conversation, this meeting, this entire night, none of it happened." They stood up, gathering their folders. "If you value your career, your pension, and your freedom, Sergeant, you will never speak of this again. Not to your wife, not to your friends, not to anyone. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." They left. Colonel Brennan remained, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Mitchell," she said quietly, "but this is how it has to be." "Ma'am, with respect, what the hell did we just witness?" She looked at me for a long moment. "I don't know, David, but whatever it was, someone very high up wants it buried." The watch commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan, entered the command center. She was a 38-year-old officer with 15 years in the Air Force, calm under pressure, the kind of leader you wanted in a crisis. "How long has it been there?" she asked, her voice steady despite what we were all seeing. 90 seconds, ma'am," I replied. "Any communication attempts?" "Negative, no radio signals, no transponder, nothing." She studied the screen for a long moment, her jaw tight. I could see her mind working, running through protocols that didn't exist for a situation like this. "Scramble fighters from Peterson. I want visual confirmation." Within minutes, 2 F-16 from the alert barn at Peterson Air Force Base were in the air. I tracked them on my screen as they climbed toward the unknown object. Their call signs were Raven 1 and Raven 2. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. We monitored the airspace, but the object didn't return. The F-16s from Peterson did a full sweep of the region and found nothing. By 0600 hours, 6 in the morning. When my shift ended, I was exhausted. Not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of what I'd witnessed. Marcus and I walked out of the command center together. Neither of us spoke until we reached the parking lot, half a mile from the facility entrance. The sun was just starting to rise over the eastern plains, painting the sky orange and pink. Everything looked normal, peaceful, like nothing had happened. "That was real, right?" Marcus finally asked, his voice quiet. "I didn't imagine that." "You didn't imagine it," I confirmed. "None of us did." "What the hell was it?" I shook my head, still trying to process everything. "I have no idea, but whatever it wasn't ours." 3 days later, I was summoned to a meeting at Peterson Air Force Base. The email was vague, just a time, a room number, and instructions to come alone. No explanation. When I arrived, Colonel Brennan was there, along with 2 men in civilian suits I'd never seen before. No introductions, no names, just government-issue badges that read Department of Defense with photo IDs that revealed nothing. The room was small, windowless, soundproof. The kind of room where classified conversations happened. One of the suited men gestured to a chair. I sat. "Sergeant Mitchell," he began, sliding a stack of documents across the table. His voice was flat, bureaucratic, the kind that had delivered bad news to people 1,000 times before. Do you know why you're here? I assume it's about November 5th, sir. Correct. What you witnessed on that date was a classified operation. The details are not open for discussion. What I need from you today is your signature on these documents. I looked at the papers. Non-disclosure agreements, security classifications, legal jargon that basically said, if you ever talk about this, we will destroy you. These NDAs are binding under federal law, the second suited man explained. Violation of these agreements constitutes a breach of national security. Penalties include loss of security clearance, loss of military pension, federal prosecution, and imprisonment. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. The first man tapped the top document with his finger. The official position is that what you tracked on November 5th was an experimental aerospace vehicle undergoing classified testing. That is the only explanation you are authorized to know or discuss. Understood? I looked at him. We both knew it was a lie. Experimental aircraft don't perform maneuvers that violate physics. They don't hover with zero propulsion. They don't disappear into space at velocities our fighters can't match. But I also understood the message. Accept this lie or face consequences that would destroy my life. Yes, sir, I said. I understand. They watched me sign every page. Initials here, signature there, date, print name, 23 pages of legally binding silence. When I finished, they gathered the documents into a folder, sealed it, and stood up. Sergeant Mitchell, your report from November 5th has been reclassified top secret SCI. All logs, radar tapes, and recordings from that shift have been confiscated. Your security clearance remains active, but you are now subject to special access program restrictions. You will not discuss this incident, not with your wife, not with your colleagues, not with anyone. This conversation, this meeting, the events of November 5th, none of it happened. Is that absolutely clear? Yes, sir. Crystal clear. The second man leaned forward, his eyes cold. If you value your career, your pension, your freedom, and your family's well-being, you will never speak of this again. People who violate these agreements don't just lose their jobs, Sergeant. They disappear into the federal prison system, cases that never see trial. Do I make myself clear? My blood ran cold. That wasn't just a threat about legal consequences. That was a threat about making me vanish. You've made yourself very clear, sir. Good. He straightened. This meeting is over. You're dismissed. I walked out of that room feeling like I'd just sold my soul. Colonel Brennan caught up with me in the parking lot. David, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we were alone. I'm sorry, but this is how it has to be. Ma'am, with all due respect, what the hell did we witness? She looked at me for a long moment. Her professional mask slipped just slightly, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. I don't know, she said finally, but whatever it was, someone very high up wants it buried, and they have the power to bury anyone who tries to dig it up. Do you believe it was experimental aircraft? She didn't answer, just looked up at the sky, then back at me. Go home, David. Hug your wife. Live your life. And don't think about November 5th anymore. She walked away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with the weight of imposed silence pressing down on my chest. For the next 7 years, I continued working at NORAD. I never saw another anomaly like that. The incident was never mentioned again. The files were buried so deep, it was like it had never happened. Sometimes I'd be working my shift, staring at the radar screens, and I'd wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. If maybe I'd had some kind of hallucination. But then I'd remember Marcus's face, the F-16 pilot's voices, the readings on my screen, the way that object moved, and I'd know it was real. In 2011, I retired from the Air Force. Sarah and I had 2 kids by then, a daughter, Emily, and a son, Jake. I took a job with a defense contractor doing IT support. Boring work. safe work. The kind where you don't track objects that shouldn't exist. Life moved on. Normal. Predictable. I coached Little League baseball, went to school plays, fixed broken washing machines, became the guy who grills burgers at neighborhood barbecues. The guy everyone thinks is just a normal dad with a normal past. But I never forgot that night. Never forgot watching something that shouldn't exist perform maneuvers that shouldn't be possible right above our heads. And I never forgot the threats, the documents, the fear in Colonel Brennan's eyes when she told me to just let it go. For 22 years I carried that weight, that secret, that burden of knowing something the world wasn't allowed to know, until last month. October 2026. I was at home, working from my home office on a Tuesday afternoon. Just routine IT work, setting up network security for a client, running diagnostics on some servers. Boring, but stable. Sarah was at work. The kids were in college now. Empty nest life. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any deliveries. Went to the door, looked through the peephole. Nobody there. Just a package sitting on the porch, no return address. Just a box number in Washington, D.C., and my name written in precise, official-looking print. The kind of handwriting you see on government forms. I brought it inside, set it on my desk, stared at it for a solid minute. Something about it made my hands shake. Maybe it was the government-style labeling. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was 22 years of suppressed memories suddenly pressing against the surface of my mind. I opened it. Inside was a manila folder, heavy paper, official government stamps in red ink, and a letter on letterhead from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. My hands were definitely shaking now. The letter was brief, formal, bureaucratic. Mr. Mitchell, in accordance with the fiscal 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1556, the Department of Defense is required to provide congressional briefings regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, intercept operations conducted by NORAD and Northcom since 2004. Your testimony has been requested by the House Oversight Committee as part of their inquiry into military UAP encounters. Enclosed are declassified portions of the incident report from November 5, 2004. Your non-disclosure agreement signed on November 8, 2004 has been superseded by congressional mandate under the authority of Public Law 119-81. You are hereby authorized to discuss this incident for the purpose of congressional testimony. A hearing date will be provided within 30 days. Your participation is not optional pursuant to congressional subpoena authority. Regards, Dr. John Kozlowski, Director All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. I read it 3 times. Congressional mandate, superseded NDA, testimony requested. 22 years of forced silence, and now Congress wanted me to talk. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were pages I'd never seen. The full incident report from that night at Cheyenne Mountain. But it wasn't the sanitized version they'd shown me in 2004. This was the real report, the complete analysis. It included technical assessments I'd never been briefed on. Radar data showing the object's exact performance characteristics, acceleration curves that exceeded human survivability by factors of 50 or more. Calculations proving that the G-forces during those maneuvers would have killed any human pilot instantly, turned their organs to liquid, compressed their bones to powder. There were metallurgical analyses of the radar signature. Scientists had tried to reverse engineer what materials could produce that specific reflection pattern. Their conclusion: no known terrestrial material matched. The radar cross-section suggested a metallic composition that didn't exist in any periodic table we had. There were thermal analyses showing 0 heat signature, despite velocities that should have made the object glow white-hot from atmospheric friction. Atmospheric models that couldn't explain how it moved without creating sonic booms or shockwaves. And there were statements from the F-16 pilots, full, unedited statements that I'd never seen. The craft appeared to be constructed of a metallic substance unlike any material I've observed in 15 years of military aviation. The surface was seamless, no rivets, no welds, no panel lines. It reflected moonlight but seemed to absorb other wavelengths. When it moved, it didn't accelerate. It was simply in one place, then another. No transition, just instant relocation. When the object departed vertically, I estimate its acceleration at over 15,000 feet per second. That's approximately 500 Gs. Nothing human-made can survive that. Hell, nothing human can survive that. The pilot would be paced. I've flown against Russian jets, Chinese aircraft, everything in our own arsenal. This was none of those. This was something else entirely. And then, at the bottom of the report, was a conclusion I'll never forget. It was stamped in red ink. Final assessment, November 2004. The object displayed flight characteristics that exceed any known aerospace technology by several orders of magnitude. Current understanding of physics and aerospace engineering cannot account for the observed performance capabilities. The propulsion system, if such exists, operates on principles not currently understood by human science. Radar signature analysis indicates material composition inconsistent with any known terrestrial metals or alloys. Thermal analysis shows zero heat emission despite velocities exceeding Mach 5, which violates all known principles of atmospheric dynamics. Object demonstrated apparent awareness of NORAD, tracking systems, and deliberate positioning over Cheyenne Mountain Complex, suggesting intelligence and intent. Origin remains unknown. Threat assessment inconclusive pending further encounters. Recommendation: continued monitoring and classification at highest levels. Incident to be sealed under Special Access Program protocols. Public disclosure not recommended at this time. Signed by 3 different scientists, 2 generals, and someone whose name was redacted. And there was a photograph, a clear, high-resolution photograph I'd never seen before, taken by the F-16 pilot's targeting camera. The disc-shaped object, captured perfectly against the night sky, moonlight reflecting off its metallic surface, approximately 50 feet in diameter, just like the pilots described. Smooth, seamless, no visible engines or propulsion, no wings, no markings. Just a craft that absolutely, definitively was not made by human hands. I sat there staring at that photograph for, I don't know how long. All those years, all that silence, all those threats. And it was real. Everything I remembered was real. Documented, analyzed, photographed. And now Congress wanted me to tell the world about it. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The following week, I received a phone call, a staffer from the House Oversight Committee. Young voice, probably mid-20s, excited and nervous all at once. Mr. Mitchell, my name is Jennifer Reeves. I'm calling from the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. We'd like you to testify in an upcoming hearing about unidentified anomalous phenomena encounters at military installations. I'd been expecting this call since the package arrived, but hearing it still made my stomach drop. When? I asked. November 19th, 2 weeks from today. We'll fly you to D.C., put you up in a hotel, cover all expenses. You'll testify alongside 3 other military witnesses who had similar encounters. A public hearing? Yes, sir. Open session. Media will be present. This is about transparency, Mr. Mitchell. The American people have a right to know that these objects are real, that they've been operating in our airspace for decades, and that the military has been tracking them while telling the public they don't exist. I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. 22 years of forced silence, 22 years of carrying this weight, 22 years of being told to forget what I knew was true. When do you need me in D.C.? I asked. Flight leaves Monday, November 17th. Hearing is Wednesday the 19th at 10:00 hours. I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time. Sarah came in, saw the expression on my face. David, what's wrong? I showed her the letter, showed her the declassified report, showed her the photograph. For 22 years, I couldn't tell her what happened at NORAD, couldn't explain why I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night staring at the ceiling. Couldn't share the burden I'd been carrying. Now I could, and I did. She read everything, her eyes getting wider with each page. When she finished, she looked up at me. You saw this? You actually saw this thing? I tracked it on radar for 23 minutes, watched it perform maneuvers that should be impossible, listened to F-16 pilots describe it over the radio, and then I was threatened into silence for 2 decades. She reached across the desk and took my hand. Are you going to testify? Yes. Good, she said firmly. It's time people knew the truth. November 19th, 2026. 22 years and 2 weeks after that night at Cheyenne Mountain. The hearing was held in the Rayburn House office building, room 2154. The committee room was enormous, tiered rows of seats for the members of Congress, a witness table down below, and packed galleries for media and public observers. Cameras everywhere, lights, microphones, the whole circus. I sat at the witness table with 3 other military veterans. To my left was Commander Lisa Chen, former Navy pilot, 43 years old. She'd encountered a UAP off the coast of California in November 2004, the same month as my incident. To my right was Captain Michael Torres, Air Force, 51 years old, who witnessed a UAP over Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 2012. And next to him was Sergeant First Class Robert Hayes, Army, 46, who reported seeing a massive triangular craft while deployed in Iraq in 2008. 4 military witnesses, 4 separate encounters, 4 stories that had been buried, classified, and suppressed for years. The committee chairman, Representative Amanda Walsh from New York, called the hearing to order. She was 58, steel gray hair, sharp eyes, the kind of person who didn't tolerate nonsense. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. This hearing of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability is called to order. She waited for the room to quiet. Every seat was filled. Media from CNN, Fox News, NBC, the New York Times, Washington Post, independent journalists, podcasters, everyone. This hearing, Representative Walsh continued, is about more than just unusual sightings in our skies. This is about transparency, accountability, and the American people's right to know what their government knows about unidentified anomalous phenomena, commonly known as UFOs or UAPs. She let that sink in. UAPs, not weather balloons, not experimental aircraft. UAPs. For decades, military personnel have reported encounters with objects that perform maneuvers our current technology cannot explain. These reports have been classified, buried, dismissed, and in many cases, the witnesses have been threatened or intimidated into silence. But thanks to the fiscal 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, which requires greater transparency from the Department of Defense regarding UAP encounters, we now have the opportunity to hear directly from credible military witnesses about what they experienced. She gestured to us at the witness table. Today's witnesses are not conspiracy theorists. They are not seeking fame or attention. They are trained military professionals who encountered something they cannot explain and who have lived with that knowledge in silence, sometimes for decades, until now. They represent hundreds, perhaps thousands, of other service members who have had similar experiences but remain unable to speak out. She paused, looking directly at us. Gentlemen, Commander Chen, Thank you for your service to this nation, and thank you for your courage in coming forward today. Your testimony will be heard, and it will be taken seriously." Then she turned to the committee members. "Let me be clear to my colleagues and to the American people watching. This is not a hearing about science fiction. This is a hearing about real events, documented by real censors, witnessed by trained military observers, and systematically suppressed by elements within our government. That ends today." The hearing opened with preliminary statements from committee members. Some were skeptical, some were curious, some, a minority, were dismissive, but they all listened. Then came the questioning. "Mr. Mitchell," Representative Walsh began, "can you please describe in your own words what you witnessed on November 5th, 2004? I leaned forward to the microphone. This was it. 22 years of silence about to end. "Ma'am, I was a technical sergeant with the United States Air Force, working as a radar operator at NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado Springs. On November 5th, 2004, at approximately 0200 hours, 2 in the morning, our systems detected an unknown object at 80,000 feet over Wyoming. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking under the table. Sarah was in the gallery behind me. I could feel her presence. When we attempted to identify the object, it performed maneuvers that should be physically impossible. The object stopped instantly from a speed of 500 knots to 0 velocity. Then it dropped from 80,000 feet to 40,000 feet in 3 seconds, which translates to 800,000 feet per minute. To put that in perspective, that descent rate would subject any human pilot to G-forces that would be instantly lethal. I saw some committee members lean forward. The room was dead silent. The object then ascended to 90,000 feet in under 2 seconds, achieving velocities exceeding 4,000 knots, faster than Mach 5, with 0 acceleration time. It simply went from stationary to hypersonic instantly. Then it stopped again, perfectly motionless. "Mr. Mitchell," Representative Walsh asked, "did you have visual confirmation of this object?" "Yes, ma'am. We scrambled 2 F-16 fighters from Peterson Air Force Base. The pilots achieved visual contact and provided detailed descriptions over the radio. They described a disc-shaped craft, metallic surface, approximately 50 feet in diameter. No visible engines, no wings, no control surfaces, no markings of any kind. Just a smooth metallic disc hovering in place." I pulled out a copy of the photograph from my folder. This is the photograph, taken by one of the F-16 pilots, declassified as part of my testimony package. A staffer took the photograph and handed it to Representative Walsh. She held it up for the cameras. The room erupted, reporters surging forward, camera flashes going off, members of Congress craning their necks to see. "Order!" Walsh called. "Order, please!" The room settled. She turned the photograph around so the cameras could capture it. There it was, clear, undeniable, official. "Mr. Mitchell, what happened when the F-16s approached this craft?" "Ma'am, according to the radio communications I monitored, when the fighters approached to within 1,000 feet, the object departed vertically at a velocity the pilots described as impossible to calculate. It went from hovering at 20,000 feet to over 140,000 feet in less than 10 seconds. The F-16s were at full military power and couldn't even begin to pursue." 140,000 feet, Walsh repeated. That's space." "Yes, ma'am. The object left the atmosphere." A murmur ran through the room. This wasn't some vague sighting. This was concrete, specific, documented. "Mr. Mitchell, after your encounter, what happened to your report?" This was the part I'd been dreading, the part about the threats. "Ma'am, 3 days after the incident, I was summoned to a meeting at Peterson Air Force Base. 2 Department of Defense officials, I was never given their names, had me sign extensive non-disclosure agreements. They told me that what I had witnessed was experimental aircraft, even though the performance characteristics made that explanation impossible. Were you threatened? I took a breath. Yes, ma'am. They made it very clear that if I ever discussed the incident, I would face federal prosecution, loss of my military pension, and imprisonment. They explicitly mentioned that violations of the NDA could result in me disappearing into the federal prison system in cases that never see trial. Those were the exact words used. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. They threatened you with extrajudicial detention, Walsh said slowly. That was my understanding of the threat, yes, ma'am. And you believe them? Ma'am, they had just shown me classified files with authority stamps I'd never seen before. They worked for DOD offices I didn't know existed, and I'd just witnessed something that should have been impossible. Yes, I believed them. She nodded. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Commander Chen, can you describe your encounter? Commander Lisa Chen leaned forward. She was composed, professional, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She'd carried this secret as long as I had. Ma'am, on November 14th, 2004, I was piloting an FA-18 Super Hornet off the coast of Southern California. We were conducting routine training exercises when San Diego Air Traffic Control alerted us to an unknown radar contact. My wingman and I were vectored to investigate. She pulled out her own photographs. When we arrived at the coordinates, we observed what we later described in our report as a tic-tac-shaped object. Approximately 40 feet long, white in color, no visible propulsion, no wings, no control surfaces. Did you engage? We attempted to intercept, yes, ma'am. The object was hovering about 50 feet above the ocean. When we began our approach, it mirrored our movements. When I descended, it descended. When I climbed, it climbed. It was playing with us. Playing? Yes, ma'am. That's the only way to describe it. It anticipated our maneuvers. Then, in the space of maybe 2 seconds, it accelerated from hover to approximately Mach 5 and disappeared off our radar. Accelerated from 0 to 3,700 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Nothing human-made can do that. And your report? Chen's jaw tightened. Classified. Buried. I was told to never discuss it. When I retired from the Navy in 2018, I received a visit from 2 men who reminded me of my NDAs and the consequences of violation. Thank you, Commander. Captain Torres? Torres shifted in his seat. He was a big man, 6'3", former Strategic Air Command officer, the kind of person who doesn't rattle easily. But I could see his hands shaking. Ma'am, on March 16th, 2012, I was the Deputy Commander for Operations at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. At approximately 0330 hours, our security forces reported unusual lights hovering over the missile field, specifically over Echo Flight, which contains 10 Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles. The room went very quiet. Missiles, nuclear missiles. I deployed a response team and reviewed the security footage. The lights, there were multiple objects, hovered in formation over our missile silos for approximately 45 minutes. During that time, the missiles in Echo Flight went offline. All 10 of them. Complete loss of communication and status indication. The missiles went offline? Walsh's voice rose. Our nuclear deterrent was compromised? Yes, ma'am. For 45 minutes, we had zero control over 10 ICBMs. The moment the objects departed, ascending vertically at high speed, the missiles came back online, every single one. No technical explanation, no malfunction we could identify. The timing was exact. Objects departed, missiles restored. And your report? Classified at the highest level. I was told the incident never happened. My security team was debriefed, threatened with courts-martial if they spoke. The whole thing was buried. Sergeant Hayes? Walsh turned to the last witness. Robert Hayes was the youngest of us, but he looked older. Combat deployments do that. He'd been in Iraq during some of the worst fighting. Ma'am, I was deployed to Camp Spiker in Iraq in October 2008. One night around 0200 hours, I was on perimeter security when the entire camp went silent. Not quiet. Silent. No insects, no wind, no ambient noise. Like someone had hit a mute button on the world. He pulled out a sketch he'd drawn. Then this appeared overhead. Massive, triangular craft, probably 200 feet on each side, completely silent, no sound whatsoever. It had lights at each corner, white, steady lights. It hovered maybe 300 feet above our heads for approximately 10 minutes. 200 feet? Someone asked. That's enormous. Yes, sir. Bigger than a C-130 transport, bigger than anything I'd ever seen fly, and it made no sound, none. It just hovered there while 200 soldiers stared up at it. What happened next? After about 10 minutes, it simply vanished. Not flew away, vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Like someone flipped a switch. And the moment it disappeared, all the normal sounds came back. Insects, wind, everything. And your report? I filed an incident report through my chain of command. 2 days later, I was called in by an intelligence officer I'd never met. He told me I had observed a classified military exercise and that my report would be sealed. I was ordered never to discuss it with anyone, including my own unit members who had seen the same thing. Representative Walsh sat back, looking at all four of us. So we have 4 highly trained military witnesses, 4 separate encounters across 12 years, all classified, all suppressed, all witnesses threatened into silence. She turned to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not fiction. These are documented incidents witnessed by credible military personnel involving technology that exceeds our current capabilities by orders of magnitude. And for decades, our government has been covering it up. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. Questions from committee members, technical details, timeline clarifications. Some representatives were supportive, some were skeptical. Some were openly hostile, suggesting we were delusional or seeking attention. But the evidence was there. Photographs, radar data, pilot testimony, official reports that had been declassified specifically for this hearing. Near the end, Representative Walsh asked the question we'd all been waiting for. Mr. Mitchell, in your professional opinion, based on your 16 years working radar systems at one of the most sophisticated aerospace tracking facilities in the world, what do you believe you encountered that night? This was it. The question I'd been asking myself for 22 years. I took a breath. Ma'am, I believe I encountered a craft of non-human origin. The performance characteristics exceeded anything in our aerospace arsenal by orders of magnitude. The flight profile was impossible using any propulsion system we possess. The radar signature indicated materials we cannot identify. And the Pentagon's response, the immediate classification, the threats, the burial of the incident, suggests they know exactly what these objects are and have known for a long time. The room exploded. Reporters shouting questions, committee members talking over each other, cameras flashing. Representative Walsh had to bang her gavel 5 times to restore order. Order! I will have order in this hearing room. The chaos settled into stunned silence. Gentlemen, Commander Chen, Walsh said quietly, thank you for your testimony today. Your courage in coming forward despite years of threats and intimidation is commendable. This hearing is adjourned. She banged the gavel. It was over. I sat there for a moment, shaking. 22 years of silence, broken. The secret, told. The truth, finally out. Sarah met me outside the hearing room. She hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Commander Chen approached. Hell of a day, she said. Hell of a day, I agreed. You think anything will change? You think this hearing actually accomplishes anything? I thought about that. 22 years of witnesses being silenced, decades of cover-ups. And now, finally, Congress was forcing the truth into public view. Maybe, I said, maybe this is just the beginning. 2 weeks after the hearing, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office released a statement. They acknowledged that the incidents we described were credible reports from trained military observers, and that they were conducting ongoing analysis of these and similar cases. It wasn't a full admission. It wasn't confirmation of extraterrestrial technology, but it was more than the Pentagon had ever said publicly. The media coverage was intense. Every major network covered the hearing. Newspapers ran stories about military UAP encounters. Social media exploded with debate. Some people believed us. Others called us liars, attention seekers, gullible fools. But we knew what we'd seen. The 4 of us who testified, and the thousands of other military personnel who've had similar encounters over the decades. We knew. A month after the hearing, I received another package. Same box number in D.C., same official letterhead. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a memo from the Department of Defense to all military commands, dated December 15th, 2026. Effective immediately, all military personnel are authorized and encouraged to report unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, encounters without fear of professional repercussion. The Department of Defense acknowledges that UAP represent a real phenomenon requiring serious scientific investigation. Historical policies restricting discussion of UAP encounters are hereby rescinded. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office will establish standardized reporting procedures for all branches of service. Personnel who previously signed non-disclosure agreements regarding UAP encounters are released from those obligations for the purpose of official reporting and testimony. The safety and security of U.S. military operations depends on our ability to accurately assess potential threats, including those we do not yet fully understand. I read it 3 times. After decades of silence, threats, and intimidation, the Pentagon was finally changing course. Not admitting what these things are, not yet, but at least acknowledging they're real. My phone rang. It was Marcus Thompson, my old partner from Station 7 at NORAD. We'd stayed in touch over the years, but we'd never discussed that night. Not once. "David, you seeing this memo?" he asked. "Just read it. 22 years. They kept us quiet for 22 years. "Yeah," I said. "They did. Think we'll ever get real answers about what those things are?" I looked out my office window at the clear Colorado sky. Somewhere up there, objects were moving that we couldn't explain, performing maneuvers we couldn't replicate, operating in our airspace with impunity. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but at least now we can talk about it. At least now other service members won't be threatened into silence." "That's something." "That's something," Marcus agreed. We talked for a while longer, comparing memories of that night. Details we'd never been able to discuss before. The exact shape of the radar return. The way the object seemed to respond to the F-16's approach. The complete absence of any heat signature that our infrared sensors should have detected. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The encounter, the threats, the silence, and finally, the testimony. Sarah came in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You okay?" she asked, handing me one. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." She'd known something had happened at NORAD all those years ago. I couldn't tell her the details. The NDAs prevented that. But she knew it had affected me, knew I carried it with me. "The hearing helped," I said. "Finally being able to talk about it. Having people believe us." "I always believed you," she said quietly, "even when you couldn't tell me what it was about." I reached for her hand. "Thank you." The truth is, I still don't know what I saw that night at Cheyenne Mountain. The official explanation, experimental aircraft, never made sense. Our own technology couldn't perform those maneuvers. Not in 2004, not now in 2026. Some people think it's extraterrestrial. Visitors from another star system, studying us, monitoring our military capabilities. Maybe they're right. Others think it's something else entirely. Time travelers from our own future. Interdimensional craft, advanced AI. The theories are endless. What I do know is this: these objects are real. They operate in our airspace regularly. The military has been tracking them for decades, and for a long time, anyone who spoke about them was threatened, intimidated, or ridiculed. That's finally changing. The congressional hearing was just the beginning. More military witnesses are coming forward. More classified files are being declassified. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office is actually taking these reports seriously now, conducting real scientific analysis instead of just burying them. We're not going to get all the answers tomorrow. This is a gradual process. But at least it's happening. At least the conversation is no longer being suppressed. Sometimes I still wake up at night thinking about that yellow dot on my radar screen. The way it moved. The way it defied everything I understood about physics and aerospace engineering. The way it hovered right above our facility, as if it knew exactly where we were, as if it was aware of us watching it. And I wonder, what did it want? Why was it there? Where did it come from? I may never know the answers to those questions, but at least now I can ask them out loud. At least now other service members who've had similar encounters can speak up without fear. That's progress. Last week I received an email from a young Air Force officer stationed at Cheyenne Mountain. She'd seen my testimony on the news. She wanted me to know that she'd had an encounter too, just last month, and she'd filed a report with AARO. No one threatened her. No one told her to stay quiet. The system is changing. "Thank you for coming forward," she wrote. "It made it easier for the rest of us." That's why I testified. Not for attention, not for fame, but so the next generation of military personnel wouldn't have to carry these experiences in silence like I did for 22 years. The truth is out there. I know, because I've seen it. I've tracked it on radar. I've watched it perform impossible maneuvers above one of the most secure military facilities in the world. And now, finally, we can talk about it. Have you ever witnessed something in the sky you simply couldn't explain? If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. We share stories like this every single day. And if you know a veteran who deserves to have their story told, share this with them. Tomorrow, another soldier breaks decades of silence about what they witnessed. You won't believe what they saw.